Okay, this video we're going to be showing kids how to tie a really simple little caddis pupa emerger thing. So it's basically just a caddis body. This one we're going to do in tan. Has a little white yarn kind of wing case kind of thing coming and some peacock curl for the head. So that's what we're going to be doing. I'm using just a nymph hook. Some people might want to use something more like a pupa hook that looks like that with a little bit more curve to it. It's up to you. I'm going to keep the material super simple so that it's really easy for our students to do. You could get fancy with it. You can add wire, rib, and all kinds of stuff if you really want it to look good and really wanted to get fancy with it, but not necessary. The one I'm going to show you, the way I'm going to show you, catches fish. And it's really easy. Only requires basically 3 materials other than your thread and your hook. So I have my thread in, I have my hook in there, and I have my thread. I chose some olive thread. So I have olive thread, and this is A-dot thread. It tends to be a little bit thin, but it works fine. And if you have black, that works fine too. I've even done them with a little bit of red in there because sometimes red is nice and it pops off there pretty well. But olive tends to work nicely. So the only thing you really need for this is I'm going to use tan. So I've got some tan, just yarn, right? So like yarn that your grandma uses to make quilts, yarn. And what I do is I take that yarn and I just pull apart the strands, right? Because I just need one of the strands. So I'm going to pull, kind of just carefully try to pull apart one of the strands. So I have the strand of yarn. And I did the same thing. So I have that yarn, I have the tan yarn, and I'm going to do the same thing. And I have some white yarn, like super white, and it's sparkly, right? So almost like Antron, like it's just sparkly white yarn. So I have that, and then I'm going to need a couple of pieces of peacock curl. Now this one I already used, but I'm going to keep using it because you can get several flies out of a couple pieces. I just need a couple pieces of it, 2 or 3 pieces at the most. And I have those 3 things ready to go for me. That's all I really need. So I have peacock curl, white yarn, tan yarn, and my thread. So the first thing I'm going to do is I am going to wrap thread, and I start just a 1/8 of an inch back or whatever, a little bit back from the head of the hook, and I just build kind of my thread on there. I'm not going to worry about the body as much yet because I have some wrapping forward to do once I put in this yarn. So I have the 2 pieces of yarn. I'm going to take both pieces of yarn together because I'm lazy. I'm just going to do them all together at once. And I'm going to wrap both pieces of yarn in there together, right? So that's all I really need to do. Now some people might want to add a little bulk to their body, and tie in that pieces. I don't like that. I want that my olive to be underneath pretty well. It doesn't really matter that much. But I'm going to trim those off. And my scissors are not doing so great. So I'm going to trim that off, and then I'm just going to carefully wrap up. And I want to keep the body of this thing. So notice it. So I need to keep building this up so that the body is smooth and even. Because think about the caddisfly larva is like a worm, and it's pretty even. It doesn't get too big at one end or anything like that I think of. So I'm going to build this body evenly up the shank of the hook, right? And I don't go all the way to the head. Notice I'm not going all the way to the head of the fly, of the hook. Just leaving a little bit of space there because I'm going to tie in that peacock curl at the head, right? So I need a little space for that. Okay, so got that in there. I'm going to leave the white behind. I'm going to take the tan, and now I'm going to wrap up the body with the tan yarn. I'm kind of pulling it a little bit taut so it pulls it slightly tight on the shaft of the hook. So I'll pull that up, make that on there nice, and then I'm going to tie it off. So now we have kind of the body of the caddis pupa itself. Trim that off to have the body of it up there so you can see it kind of just nice and even as it goes up. So that's pretty easy. Then I'm going to take this white and I'm going to make like a loop here, just a kind of a loose hump. And I'm going to tie that on. And notice what I did there. As you guys are starting to tie flies, I brought that up and I held it with my fingers, and then I brought that thread in between my fingers and looped it down around it so that my fingers kind of held that thread. So there, and then I have this like hump of white thread or white yarn that sort of gives that appearance of that's the wing case of the pupa as it's emerging out and floating up through the water column. So it's kind of developing its wings. So it's kind of an emergent version, right? So I'm going to tie that in. So it's got that little hump. Some people, I would even take maybe sometimes, it tends to get a little frayed, and that's okay. I don't mind that in the least. I don't mind it looking a little frayed. Then I take my pieces of peacock curl, right? And so I'm going to take 2 of those, and I'm going to tie those in at the head. Just trim them a little here. I'm starting to crowd my eye of my hook a little, but I'm going to be careful of that. So I tied that in. Might put another little wrap in there. And then I'm just going to bring those peacock curl around so that they kind of start to look a little like the head of the fly, and the front end of that caddis, their little legs are starting to come out in there too, so that's what the peacock curl kind of does. And I like the peacock curl because it's got that iridescent look to it. So I'm going to wrap that in, trim these off. I like to put a little half hitch, you bump the camera there, and maybe on another one because it might have missed the head. And then just my whip finish, and that's about it. There. That's all it needs. And you can cement, you can put a little bit of drop of cement on the head to make sure that's all tight. And then I just get it to look good the way I want. And that's our emergent pupa.